not too long ago, I went public and said, we will not abide by that edict. I'm not taking out what they might conclude as DEI content from our curriculum. Because a lot of that is focused on how you teach the history of the country. So we can't train Black men to teach lies. And more than likely, they'll wind up teaching other Black kids. So we got to stand against that.
Welcome, everybody, to Sundays with Vernā. We are honored to be here with Morehouse's president, David Thomas, and he's going to talk to us about a lot of things that are really in the headlines these days, which is always centered around President Trump and his attacks specifically on HBCUs. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Thomas. He is, as I said, the president of Morehouse College and an internationally recognized leader in organizational management and higher education. And I might add also an incredible colleague who's done a lot of scholarship on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Under his leadership at Morehouse, he has raised over $340 million and launched online degree programs and strengthened the role of Morehouse as a center for global leadership and social justice. David, welcome to Sundays with Vernā.
Thank you.
You know, I found out recently that for every $100 a predominantly white institution receives in endowment funds, really HBCUs receive only $1. And now that Trump and the administration has made cuts to education funding and eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that directly affect HBCUs, like from your perspective at Morehouse, how are these changes manifesting on the ground?
Well, on the ground, the way they've manifested here is cuts to grants that support faculty and students. At Morehouse, we have not had a huge effect. But for example, the Morehouse School of Medicine is quite vulnerable because of the NIH cuts and what's going on at HHS. The biggest threat to Morehouse and other HBCUs is if they were to go after decreasing Pell Grants, which go to low-income students. And, 55% of our students are eligible for Pell Grants. Now, I compare that with my alma mater, where I'm now on the board, Yale University. And they feel really good because now their Pell eligible population is at about 19%. And I sit there and I think, try 55. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if they go after Pell Grants, many HBCUs will be out of business by this time next year. Now, they've said that they're not going to go after Pell Grants. The other target would be federally guaranteed student loans. And there are two types. There's Stafford loans, which go on the student's books. And then there are Parent Plus loans, which is when your family takes out a loan to help you get through. And at Morehouse, we have more Parent Plus loans than we do Stafford loans. So if they reduce the Parent Plus, that's also going to create hardships for schools like Morehouse. There's also another big program that's a capital financing program, helps us build infrastructure and renew our campuses. If everything goes well, by the time we get to the end of next year, Morehouse will likely have a $90 million liability in that capital financing program. And that's also federally backed. And a lot of the building that's now going on many historically Black colleges and universities is financed through that program. So we're sort of holding on, with a brown knuckle grip to see what shoe is going to drop. And I will say this, this attack that's been framed as anti-DEI, in my view, is really anti-Black progress and Black power. And, almost instinctively, when people hear historically Black college, they think DEI. So if you want to do away with DEI, do away with support for HBCUs. And I've had to stand up in public settings, including with funders and corporations, and tell them Morehouse has never been a DEI solution. We've been a access opportunity solution for Black people who've been shut out of many of the opportunities and access to many of the portals of opportunity in our society.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that I really like where you're going here because I know lots of people who want to be able to explain to those who are misguided and disinformed about what DEI is, period, but also why HBCUs are so important and the roles that they've served in the Black community and in the society. So please keep talking and telling us what are the things that you are saying to folks who don't understand.
well, the things that I am saying is, if you really want to impact, and I'm especially saying this to foundations and corporations that are getting antsy because of this anti-DEI attack, who then say, well, we're still committed. We or the CEOs who stand up and say, we're not going to do anything different. We're just dialing back on, really what they're dialing back on is the D in the DEI. And that means dialing back on anything that looks like we are creating a level playing field for Black people. Um, and I tell them, well, if you're still committed, then how come you're not overcommitting in your support to the only pure channel that will affect racial equity in this country? By pure channel, what I mean is, if you want to see Black opportunity, overinvest in the institutions that have proven they can create it. HBCUs,
Yes.
um, statistically proven. Um, HBCUs have a greater chance of increasing the likelihood that someone born in the bottom quarter, socioeconomically, will end up in the top half socioeconomically. Your chances are greater if you were born like me, working poor, if you had gone to Morehouse than if you had done what I did and went to Yale, right?
Exactly.
Morehouse is a much more predictable elevator up. So,
So if you really care, if you truly believed and were committed to equity, you would see this as an important investment. And, David, you all have, and a lot of HBCUs have done so much on access by just creating internships, pipeline programs, mentoring, you name it. That's how people get access and awareness about the jobs that even exist.
right. Yeah. And the entry portals, right?
And the networks, right? I mean, everyone talks about the networks that come from Morehouse or that come from Howard or that come from any HBCUs that are real. It's real. I mean, it's awesome. We went to these predominantly white schools and there were great networks there too. But I think that folks really don't understand the true value of HBCUs. And somehow they think because your mission is to elevate a group of people that somehow that is discriminatory.
Yeah. No, yep, you nailed it. So more and more other populations are seeing the value of HBCUs, including the fact that value for money, we're actually cheaper, cost less, right? So, at Morehouse, we've proven that from Morehouse, you can go anywhere. We're the number one feeder of Black men to the Harvard Business School, to Ivy League law schools, right? So you can get there from here and for a lot less money, right?
You know, the thing that I don't think anybody knows, and it kind of blew my mind when I found this out, is that HBCUs contribute roughly, what, 15 billion annually to their local economies, is what our research shows. So what does that look like?
Well, what that looks like is, and you just take, for example, right here in Atlanta, we have a consortium of HBCUs. The largest concentration of HBCUs in one place is Atlanta. We have Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, um, and Morehouse School of Medicine. Morris Brown is also here. And we did a study not too long ago that shows that we basically put roughly $1.5 billion into the Atlanta economy. And most of that is in the people we hire. And we are hiring people who likely would not get comparable opportunities other places in metro Atlanta to what they're getting here. And so I think it's fair to say that the creation and maintenance of the Black middle class in this country has been and will continue to be highly dependent upon historically Black colleges and universities continuing to do what we've done for almost 200 years. Not to mention the talent we contribute. Um, First Black mayor of Atlanta, and the person who built Atlanta's amazing airport, Maynard Jackson, Morehouse man. Raphael Warnock, senator. Julian Bond, Morehouse man. Of course, everybody knows Martin Luther King went to Morehouse. What they don't appreciate is without Morehouse, there would be no king, right? And the great thing about my job is, every day I know somewhere out there in that 2,500 students is my king. That's what we do.
That is so deep. That is so deep, David. Thank you for sharing that and creating that perspective for people. And so I want to ask you, for the allies and the advocates and for the people who really realize that without a Morehouse, there's no king, and also the future kings and all of the ways in which you have produced the college produced such incredibly talented leaders. What can we do? Because this Pell Grant thing is very, very scary. The cuts towards education across the board, not just in HBCUs. What can we do, though, to support HBCUs? What can people do right now?
Well, what they can do right now is contribute support for scholarships and endowment, um, so that we can maintain our missions, even if there's a downturn in support from the federal government. Um, and also there are points where maintaining our mission also means standing in resistance to certain dictates. So I'll give you an example. Georgia has passed a law or legislation that no programs that are authorized to certify people to teach in public schools can have quote unquote DEI content in their curriculums. Well, we have an education program at Morehouse whose mission is to increase the number of Black men teaching in schools. Not too long ago, I went public and said, we will not abide by that edict. I'm not taking out what they might conclude as DEI content from our curriculum. Because a lot of that is focused on how you teach the history of the country. So we can't train Black men to teach lies. And more than likely, they'll wind up teaching other Black kids. So we got to stand against that. What does that mean? That means the state could pull funding, and we've got to be able to say, hey, we'll fill the gap until the world catches up with us. Because we believe that we are on the right side of the moral arc of the universe, right? And it bends toward justice, but it doesn't bend by itself.
It's so funny. I've been saying the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm glad, I'm grateful that you're quoting this, but you do know that it requires us to help bend it. It doesn't bend by itself.
Does not.
And I am so grateful that you're standing against it. And I'm kind of disappointed at the people who are not. But I also realize that sometimes people need a leader or they need someone to begin to stand up and be courageous. And that is really what I am advocating, and grateful that you are speaking up, because you're right. We cannot be complicit in teaching a history that is full of fallacies and that is absent from the contributions and the victories
Yeah.
that all sorts of people have contributed.
I mean, just imagine if you're in Florida, at FAMU, which is a Florida state institution, they've been told that they cannot teach Nobel Prize winning Toni Morrison, Pulitzer Prize winning Alice Walker, right? You can't teach some of their works. That would be like saying in a Western European civilization course, you can't teach Plato or Shakespeare.
Right? The canon. These are the folks who have contributed so much and is so much of how we see the world and how we understand things, to deprive not just Black folks, anybody, of that talent and that brilliance, is to make us weaker as a group of people, as a set of human beings.
Yeah.
But I wanted to also say that I know that there's some other states, I think Maryland in particular, and had a landmark case, which was what, 577 million legal
Right.
settlement that was reached, and that was about the underfunding of for public HBCUs. So
Right. Tennessee also had a case.
yeah, yeah. So that's another way that people, whatever role that you're in, if you are in a leadership role, if you're in state government, like, speak up, figure out what to do in order to pull us back into some sense of, I don't even know what is going on right now and what you would call it, but we have to stand up against it. I want to thank you for coming on to the show, David. I know you're busy. I know you've got a lot going on. And I just really feel like people need to understand this problem and how vital it is for us to get connected and supporting HBCUs. I guess I just wanted to end our conversation, but by asking you, what are you hopeful about? And, what do you envision for the future, in this moment?
Well, one thing that has happened in my 7 years, almost 8, leading Morehouse College is I've become very optimistic about this generation. Um, you know, I think that these young people, given the last few years since George Floyd, uh, have come to realize that you can't make the revolution on Twitter. You got to put your body on the line. You got to get out there. You have to capture the processes in democracy that you can leverage and influence. And I also see them with less of a tolerance than our generation to put up with the nonsense. If you talk to most of my guys, you say, where you want to be when you're 50, they don't want to be David Thomas. They want to have their own business. They don't want to fight their way up the hierarchy of historically white institutions only to be smashed. And they're bold enough to step out, much more bold than our generation was.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually optimistic for this generation that will lead us in the second half of this century. Those are my guys and women.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you have done and the legacy that you're leaving. And there were many before you doing the same thing. And I'm grateful that you mentioned the women as well, because I agree with you. I see a lot of hope in this generation. And boy, do we have an opportunity for them to put their strength and their, resilience and their creativity into place, because we need it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, David. Everybody out there, send your money, send your funding, advocate. Do not let us lose this important gift, not just to the Black community, but to the world at large. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow me at Vernā Myers on Instagram and Twitter. You can also listen to my podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. Subscribe to my channel and share this episode with someone who is going to join us in this space. Make sure to visit my website for DEI resources and online learning courses at vernamyers.com, and make sure you sign up for my newsletter to stay in touch with me. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time for more Sundays with Vernā.